Howdy y'all, old Ridge Runner here. Love to be in the woods, love to climb mountains. Gonna be going up Mount Mitchell, highest peak in the eastern United States of America. One of my favorite places to be on this planet. Y'all come on, let's go get on top of the mountain. I beg it. I'd rather be here than anywhere else in this world. Boy, these balsams, they smell good. These balsam forests, they are beautiful. Fall is here. Seasons are changing. They're changing some kind of fast. A lot of the poplars are getting real dusty. They're turning yellow. Notice on the way up, some of the shoemates are already turning too. Boy, they spectacular. Some of the maples, the little old Japanese and the sugar maples is turning already. I love fall, my time of year. Y'all bear with me with the camera moving a little bit. I'm kind of easing down an old rocky ledge, rocky trail right here. Now I'm in Deep Gap. I'm actually between Mount Mitchell and Mount Craig. And I'm gonna kind of come in that way. I'm heading to an overlook up here that I just love to go to. Thought it'd be a good place to sit and talk. And I want to tell you the story today of Dr. Elisha Mitchell. He's the namesake of Mount Mitchell. Mount Mitchell is the highest peak in the eastern United States of America, 6,684 feet. He's a mighty interesting fella. Made it up here to my little rock ledge. I'm about 6,400 feet right here. I come here often. I love to come right here and sit. Just sort of be by myself sometime. And that's Big Butte behind me. That'd be Little Butte right over there, and then that'd be Point Misery right there, and that actually starts the Black Mountain Range. It runs around into Clemens Peak, Step Gap, Mount Gibbs, Hallback Mountain, then Mount Mitchell itself, then over to Mount Craig. I'm over here kind of between them right here. I wanted to start the story of Dr. Mitchell, the namesake of Mount Mitchell. It's an interesting story, and he was some kind of a feller. He was born in 1793 in Washington, Connecticut. He was a graduate of Yale University, a good-sized school. In 1818, got him a job at Chapel Hill University in North Carolina. That was his introduction to North Carolina. And it was the first state-run school in the nation. He got a job teaching there. But way back then, 1818, there wasn't but 93 young'uns going there. And only 3 faculty, 4 counting him. So Dr. Mitchell, he had to wear a whole lot of hats. He had to be a whole lot of different fellers. He was called on to teach all kind of stuff. Now his degree was in chemistry, and he was a geologist, loved geology. But he was called on to teach mineralogy, zoology. He was a meteorologist. He taught botany, and I heard he even taught Latin when needed. So he wore a lot of hats around there. And on top of being a snap-up teacher, he was the commissioner of the school. He was the mercer of the school. He was the justice of the peace of the school. And on Sunday mornings, he's the preacher of the school right there. Now, boy, you talking about wearing some hats. He was a mighty fine fella. And the state took notice of his abilities and his skills and his knowledge. The Bible says, without knowledge, you're destroyed. Well, in 1825, the state asked Dr. Mitchell if he'd take over the geological survey of the state. Dr. Mitchell, he started traveling. He studied the gold region of the state, went down to the coast. And he's in this about 10 years. And in 1835, he wound up toward the mountains of western North Carolina. And he wound up on top of Grandfather Mountain. And Grandfather Mountain then was thought to be the highest mountain in North Carolina. And if you look at it, it sort of sat out there by itself. And boy, it does. I mean, I've been at the top of that thing many times, and it looks like it's just on top of the world right there. But in reality, Grandfather Mountain's under 6,000 feet. But he wound up on top of that thing, and it was from right there that he spotted the Black Mountain Range. He'd never seen them. And 8 days out of 11, the Black Mountains, Mitchell included, are shrouded in clouds. And them clouds sat down on top of them Black Mountains, and you know, if you didn't know any better, you'd never know that range was there. You know, back then, you'd never see it. But he spotted it. And when he spotted the Black Mountain Range, he started looking at that, and he come across there, and he spotted a peak that just stood out. And I mean, it just stood above. And what he had spotted was Black Dome. Black Dome was what the name of Mount Mitchell was back then. It was called Black Dome. Later on, they named it Mount Mitchell. But it was then also that Mount Washington in New Hampshire was thought to be the highest mountain in the United States of America in the lower 48. They hadn't discovered Whitney yet. Whitney's the highest, over 14,000 feet. The Governor Swain then, they decided to get Dr. Mitchell and see if he wouldn't start measuring some of these peaks. And he agreed. But how in the world do you go about measuring something like that? How do you measure a mountain? Well, there comes the meteorology in and the chemist in him in. Barometric pressure. He figured out he could put one feller at the bottom of one mountain right there. And he'd go climb to the top of that mountain right there. And they measure the differences in the barometric pressure right there. And he came up with a mathematical formula to measure it and to judge the distance. The distance in between the measurements right there is what I'm trying to say, not distance to the mountain, but although tongue-tied. But that mathematical formula led him to discover the true elevations of the mountains. And he decided then that thing was higher than Mount Washington. And he had a student named Thomas Clingman. He's a politician over in Tennessee. And Thomas Clingman told him there wasn't no high mountain at all, that the high mountain was over in Tennessee. Today you know it as Clingman's Dome in the Great Smokies, and it is the highest peak in the Smokies. It's not as high as Mount Mitchell. It's a good 45, 50 foot shorter. Anyway, Dr. Mitchell, he got to measuring this, and they went on at each other about this for a while, and they were good friends, but they became rivals out of this right here. And so in 1857, it was June 1857, Dr. Mitchell had climbed Mount Mitchell again, and he was just reaffirming his measurements. You know how it is. When you think you're right about something, you go on with it. I'm the same way. If I know I'm right about something, I go on with it. And he knew Black Dome was the highest. And he measured that, and it was a late evening. He was coming down off the mountain, and he come down off the northwest slope of it, was coming down, and he was heading back to Cane River Settlement down there. There's a fellow named Big Tom, a few other folks down there that helped guide him up here, and they'd got to be friends, and he'd drop off down there and he'd stay with them. They provided homes and food and a meal, and he'd get on back to where he needed to be from right there. They think a storm had come up that evening, and then after the storm left, it got foggy, it wet everything. You know, it was in June. Sometimes you have these pop-up T-boomers roll through. And then a cloud set down, mist set down over the mountain, fogged it in. And it just makes everything wet, and it makes it slick. I know for a fact these rocks up there are slicker than a peeled onion. And he was a dropping off, and they think what he'd done in the fog, he took a wrong turn, and he wound up what's called Mitchell Creek now. And he wound up down there, and he's ahead of a waterfall, a 60-foot waterfall down there, and some way, somehow, he slipped, and he fell down that waterfall, and he drowned. He bumped his head, knocked him out, and he drowned down there in them falls. And he come up missing. Nobody knew where he was. He didn't come back in down there at Cane River Settlement. So they come looking for him, couldn't find him. And Big Tom had guided him up there, and they got a hold of Big Tom. Big Tom's a hunter. He's a fellow that lived nearby, and he knows these mountains. And he's a good tracker. He's a legendary tracker. And sure enough, he found where Dr. Mitchell had gone off the mountain. And he went down and he followed him and found where he'd cut off. He took a wrong turn. They found him down there in the bottom of the falls, and got him out, and they loaded him out and took him to Asheville, buried him, and then a year later, 1857, late 1857, 1858, the Department of the Interior of the United States Forest Service came up, and they measured the mountain, and they confirmed that Dr. Mitchell was within 12 feet of being exactly right, and they confirmed it. And it was then they exhumed his body, and they moved him up here, and they renamed Mount Mitchell for Dr. Mitchell, and his flight to prove the height of this mountain. It truly was the highest mountain in the eastern United States of America. You know, What a doggone smart fella to be able to measure that barometric pressure and to come up with a mathematical formula and to figure out the elevation of these mountains, these lofty peaks. And there's another life, folks. I always say it on my channel. There's another life, another legacy that was left. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. It's my favorite place on this planet. I love it. Glad to have y'all along. And we'll talk to you later.